Dirty Bytes.
Welcome to Reality Bytes Radio on the 17th of August 2015. Delighted to welcome back to Reality Bytes Aaron Franz of ageoftransitions.com. You there, Aaron?
Yes, yeah, thanks for having me back here, Neil.
Not a problem, loud and clear. Great, okay, you sent me a few topics, so we'll just get right on with it. You're currently doing a number of podcast series. We'll kind of go through them all eventually. The first one was the occult themes in popular music. Do you want to take us away with that? I mean, are you going back a long way, or is it kind of recent stuff?
Well, I'm kind of bouncing all around. Some brand new songs that are like current even today, and songs that go back to 60s and sometimes even before that, you know, like rock and roll music, pop music in general, and just all sorts of different styles of music that are put out by the popular culture machine. So we're not talking about classical music, we're not talking about like jazz or anything like that, but certainly there are plenty of occult themes to find in these songs. And sometimes that what I find interesting is songs that you wouldn't expect to have any sort of any message at all, but stuff that just seems like vacuous garbage. Even like songs that are made for kids, like boy bands and stuff, there will be occult themes in those sorts of songs. So I find it fascinating that sort of stuff is in there. It's fun to point that out.
Yeah, it's I was talking to Alan Watt the other day, and we were talking about heroes, how heroes are created, and do you think there'll ever be any? And the Stranglers had a song called No More Heroes, which was it's pretty famous worldwide, and they were talking about Trotsky being a hero, and we went through the fact that Trotsky was just as bad as Stalin and all the rest of it. But they also talked about Bob Geldof. Now he wrote I Don't Like Mondays, and he was talking about, going down the area of research you started out with, in terms of the silicon chip inside her head is switched to overload. That's how the song starts off. And I mean, that's not hidden as such. It's right out and open. But I mean, are you just looking at the esoteric side of it, or are you looking at the kind of lyrics and stuff as well?
Well, primarily esoteric, but certainly that transhuman aspect is something to look to as well. Definitely that kind of stuff is put in there on purpose. I know that throughout the years, in particular, Marrilon Manson is somebody that I like to point out as having a lot of transhuman messages in the music and a lot of transhuman themes in his performance stuff. And I get into that a bit in my book Revolve. Actually, I explain that. But yeah, that is definitely going on. And with the whole transhuman thing, there's an occult side to that too. But it's just so far-reaching that there's really no end of stuff to talk about. So that's why it makes for a good series, because there's so many branches to go off onto. Well,
pick the first area you looked into. I mean, I don't know if you want to do it chronologically or just pick whatever you.
Sure. Well, one thing that I pointed out in the most recent podcast I put out is about love songs, and love songs kind of get taken for granted, and if you listen to them closely and with knowledge of occult meanings of things, you'll notice that the singer of a love song is it's interesting to ask the question, who are they singing to? Who is this love song to? You know, is it to just some like random woman? If it's a man singing, is it just like, is he singing to his wife? Is he singing to his girlfriend, a girl they knew when he was young? And sometimes that can be the case, and the song can certainly be taken that way. But if you listen a little deeper, you'll notice that the man will be singing to Isis, the mother of the mysteries, and it's pretty obvious that that's the fact when you start breaking down the lyrics. So they're singing love songs to these primordial creative forces, and you have this on both male or female vocalists. They'll be singing to the opposite sex, and then there's stuff that goes beyond that too, because the androgyny theme is so important in popular, well, in all music there, and in the occult, it's very important. And I guess just with that, I guess I'll point out that a lot of that pop stars are picked for their androgynous qualities too. Not all of them. Some of them are like, you know, the intensely. It's like, okay, we have a man here. He's the man's man, and this is a woman. But then you have the other performers that are definitely androgynous, and that's part of the reason they're put on stage too. Certainly.
Well, I mean, certainly you've got as you mentioned, Manson, and you've got the lead singer of Placebo as well, who's another one who looks kind of similar to Manson.
Yeah. You know what? Real quick, I'm sorry. With Marrilon Manson, a couple of years ago, there was this big fuss about Lady Gaga, and there was this stupid rumor that she had male genitals, or so, I think that was a rumor, and everybody's getting all up in arms like, oh, Lady Gaga's actually a man. And at the same time, there were more rumors or stupid stories in the media about how Marrilon Manson was obsessed with Lady Gaga and following her. So there's this idea that Lady Gaga is both male and female, she's androgynous, and at the same time Marrilon Manson is very much into that because he's got the same thing going on too, for whatever that's worth.
Publicity stunt maybe.
Yeah, well, definitely, all that stuff is. Yeah.
I mean, and you talk about like ambiguity in love songs, if you like. I don't know if you're familiar with the Buzzcocks, English punk band.
Yeah, I know that.
But Pete Shelley, interesting name. But his songs were always ambiguous. You didn't know if he was singing to a man or a woman, and it turned out later on that he was gay. And
there you go.
All his songs made perfect sense, you know. Mm-hmm. And one of the famous songs is "Ever Fallen in Love with Someone You Shouldn't Have." You know, and if you play it in front of a girlfriend or something, they kind of look at you funny, and then you have to point out that the guy's gay. And back in the 70s, if he'd come out as gay, he'd been beaten up down the street. But but there's things like that going on. I'm sure there's many other examples of that as well. But in terms of the esoteric side, basically these pop stars in inverted commas, or rock stars, they're basically singing hymns with obviously there's a religious context if they're ISIS.
The hidden occult religion of Freemasonry and of the secret societies in general. Yeah, that's who they're singing to a lot of times, because ISIS is symbolic of the body of initiates of the occult orders. That's one meaning of ISIS, of many. So they're singing to that, and there are a lot of songs that put in other messages that are clearly taken from secret societies and their codes of conduct and things like that. You've got Our Lips Are Sealed by the Go-Go's. It's about the need for secrecy, and when you know the truth, you can't say it outright. And if you listen to that, that's a great example, because it's like this bubblegummy pop, sort of silly, nonsensical song like that you wouldn't think has really any meaning. It's like totally disposable, but it's actually got a lot of, it's talking about secret societies and how they operate, if you listen closely. At least I think so.
Yeah, another band that was well into that kind of stuff, and they put a lot of it in the videos, was Tears for Fears.
Oh yeah, big time. Yeah,
I mean, and back in the the 80s, I guess, the early 80s, they were world famous, and there were nothing to look at. The two of them, there was nothing to look at, and they were fairly mediocre singers. I mean, they never played instruments or anything. I think that one guy was in a video with a guitar once. That's about it. But their videos were, I mean, it was all pyramids, the Eye of Horus, and Everybody Wants to Rule the World. Except everybody's not allowed to. But they never mentioned that. But I mean, they had a number of songs along similar themes, and I mean, there was a lot of bands in the 80s, particularly, I would imagine, that were of that kind of ilk. I don't know if there was any in the States. I was more familiar with the UK music at that time, so I don't know if there was any in the States as such.
You know what? That's interesting. I was planning on talking about the 80s specifically, and how occult themes were woven into songs of that period. And you're definitely right on Tears for Fears. Like, all their songs are loaded with occult messages. And but if there's this one genre of music from the 80s that I don't know if it's even like recognized as a genre or what it is, but I call it, I have a name for it. I call it inspirational rock. And when you think about it, it's the sort of like rock music that you'd hear in the soundtrack to a film from the 80s, typically from, if you think about the movie from the 80s is over, and, the guy's got the girl or whatever, then a song comes on, it's totally inspirational with, like, guitars, and it's, like, kind of cheesy and metal-like. Everybody knows that sort of song. If you listen to the lyrics from those really cornball songs, they're highly occult. They're alchemical, and big message in them is typically like, hey, look, we can do anything. You have the power to be whatever you want. And it's definitely an alchemical message. It's interesting just to like dig into those. And again, that's the perfect example of a silly sort of song. Like, this is like, what is this style of music? It's corny, it's silly, and yet there's more to it.
Yeah, no, there was also another genre that came out, was the electronic music suddenly came to the fore, with all those synthetic drums which were creating beats that people with drums couldn't even play. And it's the staccato thing that was designed to just get into your head, and you'd find yourself walking along the street humming this tune in your head that you couldn't stand.
Yeah.
And it just wouldn't go away. But and then it got into all the kind of, it was like a modern version of the psychedelic rock, was the kind of Manchester scene, and it all of a sudden all the drugs came in, and the lyrics made no sense whatsoever unless you sat down and actually listened to them and you understood what context they were to be taken in. But the excuse given was, these guys were on drugs when they wrote these songs, but I doubt they ever wrote them in the first place.
Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah, I mean, with the music industry, it's a team effort. People don't think that because they just see the big name on stage. They see the front man. I wrote an article series a while back called Alchemy in Popular Music, an introduction article. I made a point to point out just the term front man. That's what you call the lead vocalist of a band. But I mean, what is a front man? In another sense, he's just a guy who is the visible spokesperson for a larger organization, and a larger organization that doesn't want anybody but that spokesperson to get attention. So you put somebody out on the stage. They're the ones who are the image of your brand or whatever it happens to be. In this case, maybe a secret society and the message you want to portray. And then the public's attention is totally fixed on them, and they think that this spokesperson, this frontman, is like the whole of that organization, of that message, or whatever. And they're not looking behind the scenes like, well, who told this guy what to say? You don't think to say that because there's like this mythos around popular musicians in that they like somehow like just rise up from the bottom and they are artists, right? They're the artists and it's like their ideas, and nothing could be further from the truth in the realm of pop music, certainly, because they're told what to say and they're given bullet points on even how to act and how to look. Like everything is picked for them.
Yeah, well, you see some of these frontmen, as you say. I mean, I suppose the other way of looking at this, you got a lead guitarist who leads the song somewhere, and you've got the bass guitarist who's just a bad lead guitarist, I guess. That's why he's at the bass. I mean, there's your triangle, and the guy at the back with the drums is playing the ancient instrument. Mm-hmm. I don't know. It's usually a fourth piece. But I mean, in terms of these frontmen, I mean, most of them can barely stand up. Never mind write a song.
Yeah.
The guy in the Happy Mondays, his name beats me. But you've got all these kind of characters who are supposedly, stoned out their brain on whatever concoction of drugs they seem to want to stick in themselves, or drink or whatever it is, and they can barely, as I say, they can barely stand up. Never mind get sober enough or intelligent enough to actually sit down and write a song that actually means anything. So I definitely think those kind of bands with those kind of characters, somebody else is definitely doing it. I don't think it's physically possible or mentally possible for these characters to do that. And I mean, their payoff is to drink and drug themselves to death, I guess, and be oblivious.
Yeah, well, I pointed out the band Def Leppard and the song "Rock of Ages" in my podcast series here, and there's a good example of what we're talking about. It's a hair metal band, there's a bunch of hair metal goofballs. Who are these guys? They're surely they certainly appear to be nobody, and yet here they are on the big stage. And if you listen to their lyrics closely, they're pretty serious lyrics. That song "Rock of Ages," I mean, not only it's bringing up the rock, which is an intense symbol, and talking about of ages. So you're talking about something permanent, something eternal, even like something that's come throughout time from the ancient past. But it's being presented by something completely vapid and disposable, which is hair metal, which lasted like a couple of years. So what is that? What's going on there? What were we talking about? A Rock of Ages with this hair band? They shouldn't be qualified to talk about such things, you wouldn't think.
Yeah, well, I think the hair bands lasted as long as it took for the hair to grow, and that was the end of it. I mean, Rock of Ages, I mean, that itself's a hymn. So originally, the old version of it, I think it was it one of the gospel tunes? I'm not sure.
I don't
gospel
know.
music. Yeah,
maybe so. It would make sense.
Yeah, but I mean, I mean, we've all heard that the heavy metal bands were full of Satanism and all the rest of it. I'm not really sure that was such a big deal. I think a lot of that was just theatre.
Yes.
But when you think of it, like the likes of Alice Cooper and all the rest, those kind of characters as well, they definitely put stuff in the music. I would suggest, well, whether it was them or somebody else, but it was certainly in there. And the whole stage sets and stuff were done in that kind of style to, I suppose, to appeal to young people who didn't know any better. And what I've noticed that you see some gigs on TV or whatever, and especially these big festivals, and they're all doing this, the two fingers up like the horns of the devil and all that, and that seems to be for any type of music. It doesn't seem to matter, and it used to only be for heavy metal. Now they're all doing it. I don't know, that's something that's been given to them.
Mine definitely did get popular. I know what you mean. Yeah, it's crazy. With the Satanism thing, I think you're right in that it's sort of a play in that it's good to be the antagonist in a lot of reasons for these bands, because you get the angry youth, you get their attention, and because the kids are rebelling against their parents, so they're looking for wherever they can get to do that, and you get this prepackaged music that does that for you, so you pick up on it. Then you get the poor misled parents that are trying to fight back against that, and they're saying, oh, this is satanic, we got to do something about this. And in so doing, they're just playing right into it, because like it's all a big show, and they're doing it in such a way that they're just egging their children on more, and they're giving more attention to these big stars in this whole process, because everybody's looking at them, oh, are they satanic or aren't they? And then, the Satanists, like Marrilon Manson, he was proud to be a Satanist. He'll go up there and give some eloquent speech that makes him look really smart and make everybody who's coming out against him sound like an idiot. And he's able to do that. He does a speech where that works. And so, the whole thing just is furthered. Like, well, the Satanists can't be that bad, right? And yeah, it's very clever. It's very clever how all this works. But I think we'd all do well just like if with the Satanism thing, when that pops up, just ignore it and be like, yeah, whatever. Like, the kids are into like, just don't make so much of a big deal out of it as far as the parents go, because, or if you do, at least do it smart, because I haven't seen much smart refutation of this sort of stuff that really gets anywhere.
No, I suppose we could end it there and move on to the next subject. I was just going to mention AC/DC. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in the media the last couple of days in Britain. Apparently, 50% of young Brits are a little gay. So there you go, AC/DC for you. Anyway, okay. Moving on to California. Now, the state of California. You sent me this saying the state of California. I don't know if you meant the droughts or just in general. So you can take that away.
Sure. Well, the droughts are an interesting thing to look at. But yeah, I was just talking about the state in general and kind of the symbolism involved in the history of not just California, but the idea in America of going west, and going west in search of gold specifically. So you're going from the east to the west. The sun rises in the east, it sets in the west. So you got birth and death, life, death and rebirth idea in the esoteric concept. There's definitely a lot of that stuff going on. And when you're talking about the search for gold, which is more important, like the literal gold that the prospectors were panning for, or are you talking about symbolic gold in that you're going west to this promised land where you go and you colonize it, you set up shop, you build your cities, and then once you really get the operation going out there, that's when the gold comes out, because this is where your whole experiment culminates, because you can go no further west than California. You hit the ocean, the sun sets, so the project dies, but with death comes new life, right? So I definitely think there's a lot of that symbolism going on with California. And when they're talking about gold, I just think it's interesting to think of, when you're talking historical, when you're talking about history, if you're talking about the prospectors, the 49ers that came out here to California, is it more interesting or more important to talk about them as actual guys who are just like digging up physical gold? Or is that history remembered even and retold because symbolically it works in this occult context, and that, yes, the gold of California, and it's a golden land, and this is gold being, things of the mind, the spirit, all that alchemical sort of stuff. Is that little weird part of history retold because of its symbolic value? I think that's an interesting question to ask right there.
Yeah, I'm just looking up at the etymology of the word California. And it's saying here, I mean, this is Wikipedia, but it's saying here that it most likely came from the Arabic word Khalifa, which means steward or leader. And it says the same word in Spanish was Khalifa, easily made into California to stand for the land of the caliph, or Calafia to stand for female caliph. So, I mean, how would it possibly get that name from Arabic?
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, you're talking about like an Arabic priesthood and all this. And again, there's this religious context there. There's this context of, sort of this empire idea that you're building, that sort of idea. And yeah, with California, there's a few things going on with the name California that I get into. I think in one part that Kali is like the goddess Kali as well from like the Hindu tradition there. The Kali, which is a triune goddess. There's different aspects. One is the destroyer goddess. So it's interesting stuff to get into there. But also on the flag of California, there's a bear, which is kind of odd. People are like, oh, look, there's a bear on the flag of California. Well, what exactly is that about? But this is my thinking on it. The Callisto is the name of the Great Bear constellation, which is Ursa Major. It's also known as the Great Bear. And the bear its name is Callisto. And so the Great Bear Callisto, that sounds very similar. It's Kali, it's the same letters even. So I think Callisto, California, the Great Bear, I think that's going on with this too. And there's a lot to get into with that as well.
Yeah, I just looked at, you mentioned Kali as being a goddess, and you've got four. Mm-hmm. And Nia, apparently it comes from the Welsh for Neve, but it says it means bright.
There you go. Yeah.
Or purpose.
Yeah. Well, it's a golden place, and there's so many things that reference gold here in California. Everything's gold, and there was this attraction at Disneyland out here a few years ago. I don't think it's there anymore, but it was called Golden Dreams, and it was basically a presentation of California history. So we're talking California history again, and it was framed in the sense that it's a golden dream, the whole history of California and where we're going. And so I find that very fascinating. You get this gold symbolism popping up again and again.
Well, to suggest it's a dream means it's not reality, then, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, that too. Uh-huh.
Yeah, all these people flooded west to prospect and stuff, but didn't have any prospects when they got there. But it certainly got them away from the East Coast. Yeah. Well, in the terms of a dream and not being real, a lot of the industry out here is like that in California. You're talking about the film and entertainment industry. Everything they create is out of the ether, essentially. It's just all artifice. That's what art is. So art, film, music, it's all an artificial creation. It's if you're talking about a film, you sit down and watch a film, it's like you're in a waking dream. So the people who make these things are basically crafting dreams for the mass of the population to experience all at the same time. Very interesting. So the dream aspect in that sense is really apt here for California. You got the technology industry as well, that's kind of like the pinnacle of intellect. And if you're talking about intelligence technology, and you get into all the transhuman aspects and all that, even the virtual reality sort of thing, it gets very ethereal, actually, and it turns into a religion. So a lot of these technology guys are very religious with what they're doing, and they understand these sort of religious aspects of their technological projects. So, yeah, that's just another major industry that thrives out here in California. It kind of has that same intangible quality. California is very big on creating intangible things. Yeah, well, you have Hollywood, don't you? Which is casting spells on people, basically, through the movies. Okay, and California in general. Let's go into the droughts a little bit. What's happening there? Sure. Well, there was a guy named William Mulholland back, I think it was around the turn of the century, maybe the 20s. I forget the exact year, but he was instrumental in piping the water from Northern California down south here to Southern California.
and was it the California Water Project or something? But anyway, it was a big controversy at the time, taking the water from up north and bringing it down here. And his whole idea was to build up build Los Angeles into this big city, this big prominent city. And the only way to do that was to have a big water supply. Say, hey, look, we're going to make this thing happen. So he did everything he could to make sure that, silence the dissenters and all that in order to make this thing go through. And yes, it did happen. The water came down here. A lot of people were not happy about it. But hey, look, it's here, and it's all because of William Mulholland, or at least, he's the name that they put on the project. So that's some interesting history there, and, it's just kind of, with that whole thing, it's kind of like, should we have done that in the first place? And, there are so many people who didn't want to do that in the first place, and might it have been wiser to leave this area, which is an arid desert, pretty much, more or less. That's what it is here. People don't really think that, or people don't know that because they're given this Hollywood view of, the green grass and the palm trees. Palm trees don't grow here naturally in California. It's because the water is here. It's been piped down here, and it's fed to them that they live. But if they weren't fed water, then they would die because it's a desert. So, yeah, you got a question, like, should we have changed this desert into this big city with this water pipeline coming from so far north, and all the problems with that, and we're still having problems with it today. So yeah, I don't know.
I did read a number of years ago that the California vineyards were supplied by water that had been drilled through supposedly impervious rock a long time ago, and that water was still coming out. And I can't remember the guy's name. It might be Reich or something. I think his name. I can't remember. But he suggested, I think it was back in the early 1900s, that you could drill anywhere in California through solid rock and you'd find water because it had nowhere to evaporate to. It couldn't get back out through the rock. He said there was plenty there, and apparently the same water is still supplying the vineyards today. I don't know if you know anything about that.
No, I don't. No, I haven't heard of that one.
Yeah, and apparently this is the same situation all around the world. But I've asked many greenies. They keep saying, "Oh, there's a water shortage. The water shortage." I says, "Well, where does it go then?"
Yeah.
Does it leave the planet? No. There's as much water here as there's always been. It's just it's not in the right places. As you say, it's been pumped from Northern California to Southern California, and now there's a drought up there. Well, surprise, surprise. If you don't move the water somewhere else, then you ain't going to have a drought, are you? It's going to stay where it was.
That's right. Yeah. I've thought the same thing. Yeah, because you just have all the water on the planet. That's it. It's not changing. No doubt about it.
Yeah, I mean, if we've got a water shortage, they should be delighted about the ice caps melting if they truly are. We'll have more water, won't we? But anyway, that's another subject.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Any more to say on California?
Not really. It's a crazy place. Let's say that.
Tell us something we don't know.
Well, some real quick, just the sort of social dynamic. I got into this on the series, but I'll say it again. People in public here, their interactions with one another are very insular, where nobody wants to interact with anybody at all, kind of when they're out in public. They kind of just want to be left alone. I think there's a lot going on there. Primarily, the big reason probably being that we're in such a densely populated area that spans such a large geographic area that people feel kind of trapped and closed in and surrounded by a massive humanity, and they just don't want to be bothered. They go out and they see other people and are like, hey, just leave me alone, I don't think people realize that until they come here, just how sort of odd the social dynamic is here. I've never seen anything quite like it because I've been all over the States. I've been to other countries too, and I've never seen anything quite like it. It's pretty bad here, and it doesn't make sense because for the most part, people are happy, it's sunny, but they don't talk to each other. So I don't know. That's just a little something.
Yeah, I've noticed here and in the UK and other countries, if you're out for a walk, everybody will say hello to you when you go by them or whatever, or give you a nod or whatever. But that annoys me because I'm out for a walk to get a bit of peace and get away from people. that just bugs me. I said, don't talk to me. Just leave me alone. But that's a different thing. But that's just me. been me, I guess.
Okay. Move out here.
No, thanks. Moving on away from California. Quigley's, Carroll Quigley's Tragedy and Hope. Now, I first read this many years ago. I got a copy sent over to Ireland from actually Oxford University. It was an interlibrary loan. They sent it over, the original one, and later on I bought a new copy, and it's basically the same. I didn't see any difference in it. Yeah. I mean, many people have looked at this. What made you choose to try and take a good close look at it?
Well, it's so important in the realm of like the alternative media, of conspiracy culture, whatever you want to call that whole realm. It's cited so often that it's important. It's become an important work. It's cited so much that it's worthy of investigation. And you get a lot of the extreme conservative groups like the John Birch Society that kind of even spearheaded bringing this book into question and citing it so often as proof of these conspiracies and all this. And they're not incorrect in that it's getting into all these realities about central banking, international banking, and the fraternity that runs that. And that's so important. It's a shame in a sense that history and how important that is and how little it's been discussed outside of this book, that kind of gets tainted by the fact that, the John Birchers and whatnot were the ones pointing this out. That I do believe that it does get tainted by that because, they come, people don't like the John Birch Society. They don't like the far right wing. And so if they're out there kind of pointing out all this important information, that important information is going to get not looked at because it's all those crazy conservative idiots doing that, right? So there's that aspect of things going on. At the same time, like how many people are really going to read this anyway? But what can you say? It's an amazing book written by an interesting character. Carroll Quigley is a very interesting character. I think the whole reason that this book exists is due to the fact of Quigley's character and him being so odd. And he's definitely an opinionated guy, you know what I mean? And he's very... you get the sense that he always feels that he's right. And that's in everything he's always right. Like his opinions are always correct, and that sort of attitude I think is what led him to sort of publish this book in the first place, because this is the information that was intended originally to be secret. And he said, you know what, I think that everybody needs to know this, and so therefore I will publish it, and that's that. And the exact reality of that, and whether he did sort of like go against the wishes of the central bankers and all that in publishing this, or whether he was actually doing it at their behest and they wanted him to do this, you can get into that. But I do think that I tend to believe that it's because he is so due to his character that he did publish this, and that maybe it might have been a PR incident of sorts for the central bankers, but ultimately, it's not going to hurt them too much.
Well, as you say, I mean, I've read it 3 times now, and you always come across things that you missed the first or second time or whatever. But I mean, it strikes me as, I mean, the guy, as you say, was opinionated, but there's a certain amount of arrogance which all these kind of characters have anyway, and that he thought, people just have to accept this. That's the way it's going to be, and that's the way it's always been, and they've just got to accept it. And as you say, I think if these bankers buddies didn't want him to get it out, it wouldn't have come out.
Yeah.
I think or something would have happened to him. Somewhere down the line, but he was allowed to live on to an elderly old age. So I don't think it was an accident at all. I think it goes back to they want to tell us what they're doing, so they nobody can complain, can they? Well, we told you, we published all that. You never did anything about it. You never went to your local politician and said, hold on a minute, what's this about?
You know what would be interesting is, in terms of this being the book being put out purposely, is if the whole presentation of the John Birch Society extreme right-wing wingers pointing out this book in the conspiratorial context, whether that would be all part of the drama too, and that, as I was saying, people hate the right wing, and therefore they're not going to listen to any of this, or the extreme right wing like them, they're not going to listen to it and dismiss it. So you can simultaneously put it out, a couple people will listen to it, but the vast majority of the population will just ignore it right away. And so, yeah, you have the information out there, but what does anybody do with it? Nothing, really.
Yeah, well, as you say, if the John Birch Society's put it out and then people are just going to back off because of that fact, they're still not going to go and read the book themselves. Well, I mean, that's all they have to do is read it themselves, never mind the John Birch Society.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
But because it's 1,300 pages or something, and it's very small type as well. It's a lot of reading, and it's all dates, names, and stuff like that. I mean, it's you plough your way through it, and I think there's one certain section where there's quite a lot of information, and the rest of it's just piecemeal as you go through.
Yeah.
And you kind of go, oh wow. But no, and I don't think anybody today who's in the 9 to 5, family, everything, watching football at the weekend, whatever, is ever going to read a book this. Any of the others on eugenics or whatever it is, any of the H.G. Wells stuff, which is laborious to go through, to say the least. But they're not going to read it. And as you say, if the likes of John Birch Society is part of this, giving it a conspiratorial kind of slant, and where people are just going to be put off it, then that could be done with any book. If somebody somehow managed to highlight another book, just say one of the H.G. Wells ones or something, where he's talking about, what's his name, Obama's Science Holdren. When that book was splashed all over the internet, I knew nobody who'd read it. I mean, I got a copy and read it, the relevant bits, and my friend got a copy and read it. But I mean, that's it. You're trying to say to people, here's Obama's Science Czar. He's talking about putting chemicals in the water and the food to sterilise you. What do you think of that? Oh, that's conspiracy theory. Well, really? And they go, yeah, well, they wouldn't do that, would they? That's the answer you get.
Yeah. Well, at the very least, they talk about it, and they talk about it quite openly. So, yeah, that's, if nothing else, that needs to be cause for concern. That's crazy, though. I mean, I think with John Birch, I believe he was CIA. I think he was in the CIA. It was something like that. So, that's kind of a tip to make you wonder about that whole organization too. And yeah,
I don't think the word "was" and CIA come in the same sentence. I think you're always in there.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, we're down to the last 20 minutes or so. Move on, unless you've got any more to say about Quigley.
No, not particularly.
Okay. The last subject you gave me was the dark side of the alternative media.
Yeah. It's big. I guess, well, you could tie this into the John Birch Society, because so much of the alt media is kind of based on those sorts of ideas, those ultra-conservative ideas. That's a large part of it, at least. That's not the whole of it. But yeah.
Well, we spoke before about the neo-Nazi stuff that was coming into it as well, and that's again part of it. Which again, if some of these websites that are putting that stuff out are putting out really credible information, nobody's going to listen to it.
Yeah, exactly.
And again, that's got to be deliberate. I mean, it's the likes of, I'll mention Icke, I've mentioned before, but he's putting out that the moon's a spaceship, and oh, by the way, the bankers are screwing you. Well, nobody's going to listen, are they?
No.
To put it simply.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You mix all this valuable information that people should be looking at with the complete garbage, and it's just easily dismissed. It's the same thing that we're talking about with the book by Quigley being presented by the John Birch Society. Well, if anything's presented by the truth movement, alternative, whatever it is, then yeah, nobody's going to listen, except for the people who are within the truth movement or whatever, and what does that do? But there's so many questions that pop up, and surely, I mean, it's fairly obvious that the whole Nazi thing is being used purposely to some degree by someone in order to cause all these problems here and to discredit valuable information. But there's so many other deeper questions that one has to wonder, like, to what extent are there like cults, or is the truth movement a cult, and even within the truth movement, like different separate mini cults within that have like special interests within the greater conspiracy culture. And with cults and these little groups that believe extreme ideas, I always wonder to what extent are they being controlled, again, by like intelligence agencies in terms of running social experiments and in one sense actually experimenting on people psychologically and socially, but also using people from these cults to do various clandestine work because you can pull them from these cults to do things. And I don't know, it just gets crazy real quick, and one has to wonder what's actually going on.
Yeah, I've met some people that, shall we call them protests or events or whatever, and they're clearly mentally ill. I mean, there's no doubt about it. And they shouldn't be anywhere near this kind of stuff because it's going to make them worse. And like you say, I think a lot of these people are sitting in front of the computer day in, day out, maybe not sleeping for a couple of days or whatever, and just soaking up all this stuff and making themselves ill, really.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But
I've seen so many people like that throughout the years, and it makes you question yourself. It's like, well, am I crazy? And that's the worst of it, because it starts going into that territory where you start, calling yourself into question. Like, well, am I just as bad as this person? And so that's a powerful thing, and that's enough to dissuade most people from going anywhere near this, because the fear of the idea that you yourself may be crazy just for looking at this. And in this context, I just mean that so many crazy people are interested in this. It's not that the information itself is bad. It's just that the people that are attracted to it, it makes you go, oh man, it can be very discouraging.
Well, I've met a lot of them with drink problems, drug problems, and this just it exacerbates it by just depressing them even more or whatever. They don't seem to have the ability to step back from it. It's all encompassing. It's the whole lives kind of thing, and basically they've got to go out and shout from the rooftops to get a message across, which again is never going to work. And I mean, is that deliberate? Is that? Yeah. I mean, we know how technology works, and you've got Google ads and all this, but we don't know what's going on behind that screen. The stuff we're reading, we don't know if there's something else there we're not seeing consciously that will affect a certain number of people. I don't know.
Yeah. Man, the alternative media for a long time. I mean, in the earlier years of this whole thing with the 9/11 truth and all that, it was starting to gain steam. Probably like 2006 to 2008, it was really big, and a lot of people were convinced, I think for decent reasons, that it could really go somewhere. But then from that time on, it's just been a descent into the abyss of insanity, just more and more with each passing second. Now it's just ramps up with all the more and more insane ideas. You got your Icke talking about the moon isn't real, it's a hologram or wherever it is. You got the flat earth nonsense. You got the Nazis. I don't even know what the new stuff is, but there's certainly more. And as this is going on, you get the people who turn away, the people with sense, that were somewhat involved in this, just saying, I can't do this anymore. And they just walk away from it just because it's too much, and they understandably can't be associated with all that nonsense. And so in disassociating from the group, sadly, a lot of times they disassociate from, like the real purpose of getting into information and researching and understanding the world, and they kind of step away from that at the same time, which is really, that's the worst of all this. And that would be the success of, the subterfuge of whoever and how many people might be on the other end of this thing who are planning all these bad ideas and, all the counterintelligence and running the social experiments at the same time to see how effective it is. That would be the success story, and when just the people who have sense walk away. But also, there are the people who don't have any sense who get more and more fanatical, and they're the perfect ones in terms of the the counterintelligence groups, they're the ones that they need in order to fulfill the goal of obtaining this information and of there's all sorts of other directions that they can use the alternative media. There's all sorts of ways that it can be used, not just against the truth movement alternative scene in general, but the greater public. So there's lots of ramifications of this.
I'll give you one example. I was on an Irish radio station a number of years ago, and they invited a caller on, and the first one was okay. He was kind of middle of the road, but he was okay. He was kind of being rational about it, what we're talking about. And then they got this other guy on, and he was ranting on a bit, and then the presenter said to him, "Do you believe in such?" And it came out with the phrase, "I'm open to suggestion," and I thought. There's a plant if ever there was one. I'm open to suggestion, which means anything he was told was going to be taken on board, and they just yeah.
He's hypnotized, yeah.
Yeah. I lost my train of thought there because that just came to mind. Oh yeah, I was looking at. I've got the dark side of alternative media written up here, and I'm thinking like native should be grassroots. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you alter native media. Who came up with the term alternative media?
Interesting. Alternative, yeah, huh?
I don't know. Just came to me.
Yeah, no, that's good.
Okay.
Yeah.
In terms of, I mean, I think we've had this kind of discussion before, but how dark do you see this going? I mean, obviously, I think down the line, people in the alternative truth movement, whatever, are going to be blamed for a lot of things to finally put a nail in the coffin of it. And you mentioned before talking about making a documentary of the worst of the alternative media, and I think that's well worth doing. As I say, get it out there before somebody else does.
Well, the thing, the idea behind that is it would be so easy to make. It's not something that I necessarily want to make, but I think it's something that will be made by someone in order to have this sort of culminating event you're describing here, Neil, where you just like totally out the alternative media as this evil. As the evil bad guy to go after for whatever reason, whether that be for some sort of draconian laws or, locking citizens away for any reason you want, you could use the truth movement to do that, and by showing how ridiculous that it is. And all you'd have to do is have back-to-back clips of the worst of Alex Jones, and that could be hours and hours on end, the worst of Alex Jones. Like, some of the stuff he says on air is so bad, if you just cut it together, it would be damning. And all you'd have to do is say, hey, look at this guy, look at his audience, they're horrible. Now let's go after him. And whatever sense that is, the going after him, that's the disturbing part to me, that I feel as though we're moving towards that inevitably at some point. I don't know to what degree that's going to happen, but I can't help but shake the feeling that will happen in one way or another.
Yeah, I think when you see Alex Jones and David Icke saying they're going to retire, you might expect it to happen around then. But in terms of the worst of the Truth Movement documentary, I suggested before that somebody should make it and say this is what we've got to avoid, and get it before that happens. And say, we've got to kind of grow up and be completely rational. Don't go out on a rant and a rave and shouting about, as I say, the moon being a spaceship or whatever it is, and just state the facts and take that onus away from the likes of John Birch Society, if you can possibly get a platform to do it. And of course, that's the problem. But in terms of like explaining Quigley in simple terminology, and I don't know how you do it. you put up a page, whatever it is, on the side of a building. You say, read that, And
the inherent problem is that the guy who screams the loudest and who sounds the craziest gets the most attention. So that's what we're also combating too. So these maniacs that are yelling at the top of their lungs. Well, everybody, oh look, that guy's loud, and so the answer to that is like the opposite. But it's also true that nobody is really going to listen. Be like, oh, that guy's just kind of quietly talking. He sounds kind of boring. You know what I mean? Like, why would I listen to that? There's no pizzazz there. There's lots of reasons for this. People are just inherently like that. But with entertainment, our senses have been so dulled to everything that we need like the most intense stimulation in any regard just to look at something. So you look at TV now, and even commercials are like so off the wall and bizarre and strange and intense because they have to be just to hold the attention of the viewer now. So things are getting really weird. It's important to realize that.
I mean, how bad can the alternative media get? I mean, is there going to be somebody who comes out who's beyond Jones, who's totally off the wall, who suddenly starts to get all the attention and all the funding, of course. I mean, are we going to see some absolutely crazy person given some airtime and a wide berth to say exactly what they want, and then we'll all be stigmatized and made into some kind of criminals through new legislation. You can't say this, hate speech, blah, whatever. And if they ban terrorist organizations, they ban people being a member of a terrorist organization. Are they going to go down the road of calling the alternative media a terrorist organization? If you say you're part of the alternative media, you'd have to come up with another term. You'd have to call it, I just report on the news kind of thing, and nobody's going to listen to you. Yeah.
I mean, I can definitely see these things happening just with all the things they've woven into the media over the years with the terrorism and the lone wolf scenario and the homegrown terrorism. They've been building this up for years and years and years and years, trying to get us to think that just extreme ideas and extreme political idealists are out there who are just ready and willing to become terrorists. And certainly the alternative media is rife for picking up on that propaganda thread and using it. And again, there's so many different ways to go. If the intelligence services had assets, however they may acquire them within the alternative media, people that they were even just patsies they were feeding to get to do stuff, willing idiots, sort of like in the same sense of the World Trade Center bombings back in the 90s and all that, kind of like the willing idiots that they sort of just they handed them the bombs and here, go do this, and then they turn around and go, hey, these guys are bad. That's so easy to do, and the alternative media is getting more and more extreme every day, so it just kind of fits into the whole narrative of the political extremist, the terrorist, who is wanting to strike back, the neo-Nazi. He's violent by nature, so he's bound to become a terrorist sooner or later, and the alternative media is just swimming with neo-Nazis now, so I don't know. I don't see anything good coming of this, but that's why we need to talk about this sort of stuff now ahead of time before any of this nonsense does actually happen.
Yeah, I suppose one name that came to mind was the guy. Was it Anders Breivik, the Norwegian guy who went on the island and shot all those people?
Yeah.
He wasn't cited as being part of an alternative media or truth group or anything, but he certainly had some kind of gripes against government, like we all have. And it's kind of going down that road, and he was again the lone gunman, although apparently he wasn't. But that's maybe that was just a tester. Who knows? But I'm sure, as I mentioned, I've met so many people who are clearly mentally ill in this movement, if you like, and they are going to be the gullible patsies who are led down the path of doing something crazy, and they'll think they're doing the right thing.
Yeah. People don't realize how easy that is to do, how easy that is to make that sort of thing happen. And it's unfortunate. It's sad, but it's true. So it's something that we have to realize. And it's hard to know. It's hard to know what to do in the face of all this, in terms of defending ourselves against it, in terms of trying to stop it. It's hard to say, other than we do need to talk about this as very real realities, and we need to notice the trends within the propaganda, again, the homegrown terrorists, the extremists, all that, and point that out as much as we can. Say, okay, why is this homegrown terrorism thing so big? Okay, if ISIS is such a big problem, what is it to begin with? And the big thing in the news now is that ISIS has this commanding social media presence, so they're gonna take over hearts and minds on Facebook now, and we're all going to be in trouble because they're going to start recruiting just average kids to be in terrorist groups. So there you